Come with me, I'll tell a story that you might have heard before. Graphically novel, but the same old trouble. Villains always knocking at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same.
Thank you, Vandello, and welcome once again to Graphically Novel. My name is Josh Wasta, a.k.a. Fallout Fury, and with me is my Loki, my mask.
Oh, I was going to say, wait, which episode are we doing?
My swing revival.
Swing revival.
It's fair.
Oh, and with us, as always, the lovely and talented, our Cameron Diaz.
Yikes.
Gee, baby, ain't I good to you?
The Baronessa, Miss Jennifer Howland.
Thank you, Bear. And it's my distinct pleasure, as usual, to introduce our guest. Today, we are graced with the presence of Mr. Jim Shopp. Thank you for being with us, Jim.
I'm a guest. Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
Jim, the man that we were going through this season, and we were like, so the mask is coming up. Oh my God, we should get Jim.
Hold on. I have a parrot singing SpongeBob SquarePants in my head. Hold on. There we go. Howdy.
There we go.
I mean, that would fit for our cartoonish-like episode.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. It does fit for the mask episode. So,
Can we put the mask on the parrot?
probably it went on a dog.
It's true.
Yeah. So Jim, this is your first time on a graphically novel production, and it is tradition here that we ask you to give us a little background in your history of comics. Are they a big part of your life? Are they, something that you've left behind, or where are you with comics?
Once a year, I spend about a full week just immersing. I get every issue of everything that I want. I just kind of do it while on vacation. Haven't done it in a while, but this was nice. I got to read up on some stuff and watch a movie that, we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
We're
sure
going to talk
are.
about it, that's for sure.
So when did you start reading comics?
Oh, geez. When I was in fourth grade, there was a neighborhood comic book store on my way home, and I used to stop in there all the time. And the guy ran the comic book store, and had made money with the hairdresser store next door. That was his main operation. But I'd go in and learn about everything and read everything, and he didn't make me pay that much, so I got to just kind of read in the shop and stay a bit until parents got home, and then I'd run home, be late, and get in trouble for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's also vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
Where have
Well-
I heard that before?
But that's funny. I'm now thinking about the relationship of like barbershops or hair salons and comics, because obviously there's in Cedar Falls there's the limited edition, which is started as a hair salon, and then they just put in a comic book store into their spare space. But then you're telling me that the same guy owned the hair salon next door. And my introduction to comics, actually going back, was at Jim's barbershop here in Cedar Rapids, where he had just 1960s Fantastic Four and a couple of Avengers comics and stuff laid out. And I mean, those same comics had been there the 10 years that I was going to that barbershop. So I had them pretty much memorized.
Keep the kids busy and...
Yeah.
Right. But that's funny. I've never thought of how many intersections between hair salons or barbershops and comics there would be.
Makes sense.
Being a nerd was not as profitable or as accepted as it currently is now.
It's true.
It used to be kind of a thing you did on the side. So he had to make money, and that's how he did.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So we are here today to talk about The Mask, both the 1991 comic and the 1994 movie. Jim,
that close together? Wow.
Yeah.
Jim, how long had it been since you had watched The Mask?
1995.
Okay.
With good reason.
Yes.
So 26 years.
I remember liking it. I remember fondly liking it. You guys really ruined something of my past. I should not have watched this again.
Yeah, this is not the first time that we've run into this issue.
Yes.
This is in '95. I didn't know what the term incel was. I didn't know what the term fanfic was. I didn't know a lot of this, and now, yeah.
We didn't know exactly how problematic Pepe Le Pew was.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Bear, how long had it been since you had watched The Mask?
You know, I don't think I ever saw that movie all the way through when it came out, because that was after Ace Ventura.
Yep.
And I had seen Ace Ventura. Was that after The Cable Guy?
No, Cable Guy was shortly after this.
Okay, because I remember seeing...
Yeah, this was his first, big payday, I think.
Ace Ventura introduced people. It wasn't a huge payday, but it introduced people. And then this was, yes, they rewrote the script for The Mask based on what he had done on Ace Ventura. And, gave him this role.
But let's be fair, you couldn't have picked a better actor for a movie like this than Jim Carrey.
There is in fact a whole section of The D that talks about how...
The D.
How,
Thank you, Jason.
The special effects people, actually tallied and calculated how much money they saved by casting Jim Carrey, because they had to do less manipulation of the main character, because he could just make his face do things.
Right?
Well, and his body.
Yeah.
He's very elastic.
He is.
But yeah, I never watched the movie all the way. When I watched it for the episode was the first time that I ever actually sat down and watched it straight through. And I was
welcome.
that was a reason why I didn't, I'd seen Ace Ventura and I watched them, I remember watching trailers for The Mask and everybody's like, oh my god, you gotta watch The Mask. And I remember walking into parties and stuff like that, in college or something like that. It's that's the Mask is on and I'm like, oh great, well I'm gonna sit over here in the corner and drink and talk to a girl because oh my god.
Jen, how long had it been since you had watched The Mask?
I'm not sure. I think that it was something that was being played at a kid birthday party when my children were smaller. And I do remember, pretty sure it was probably Ashley being I do not like this.
Absolutely terrified of it.
This is scaring me. I don't like it. So yeah, it's been a while. I didn't like it.
I know.
I didn't like it the first time I saw it. It's so problematic. It's so problematic.
So it's actually only probably been a couple years since I watched The Mask, and I started to, as I get older and more involved in my own background and understanding of things, I have noticed the problematic aspects, of which there are many. This is the first time that I noticed that Cameron Diaz's boobs debut for a shot, an actual camera stops shot for 2 seconds before her face is. Mm-hmm. And considering this is her first ever movie, her boobs debuted a full 2 seconds before her face did.
Yeah.
That's a thing
that unfortunate.
Happened. Yeah. But I mean, I hold an affinity for this movie, and I know how much of it is nostalgia. I have a cousin who is about 10 years younger than I am, and he grew up with Will Ferrell. I can't do most Will Ferrell stuff, but I can do, Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler movies and those kind of things. But I understand how people of a certain age that is not that very key demographic when that stuff was happening, would be no.
Or a woman.
Or women, yeah.
There's just a whole lot of, you always see the actors as they slowly transition away from SNL and start doing their own movies. And there's never really been a whole lot of them that I've really followed. Maybe as they evolved more as actors, in the beginning, yeah, Jim Carrey was hilarious. I loved Ace Ventura. I didn't see this one. I think I might have watched the second Ace Ventura. I know I watched The Cable Guy, and I was just it's not bad, but we're just kind of doing more of the same.
It wasn't really until The Truman Show that he started to get a little more balancing his complete and utter wackiness.
Starting to develop some range.
Yeah.
Breaking out of his...
You guys, do you realize, the movies he was in the 80s? He was in a bunch of really big movies.
Yeah, I know, like Once Bitten.
Once Bitten, Peggy Sue Got Married, The Deadpool, Earth Girls Are Easy.
Earth Girls Are Easy. I knew that one.
Pink Cadillac.
No, I've never watched any of those.
You ever watch Earth Girls Are Easy?
You know what? I probably saw that at some point in time, but that was probably another like college thing where people were like, "You need to see this show. It's this
You're
movie.
too
It's
young.
hilarious."
You're too young.
Yes. Well, Earth Girls Are Easy is also, I believe, why a lot of people have the Jeff Goldblum is really hot thing, because he is portrayed as a sex symbol in that movie, and it's weird.
It's weird. I always thought it was weird.
I honestly, I didn't come back around to Jim Carrey until, I mean, Truman Show was good, but it was really Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind
Yep.
and 13, when I was just like, oh, look, he can do other things besides comedy.
Man on the
Man
Moon.
on the Moon.
Man on the Moon was
Yeah.
amazing.
Jim,
Was Liar Liar before
Liar
the?
Liar.
I want to say it's
Liar was in
later.
97.
Okay.
So that was
So-
before Truman Show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Truman Show was
So that
98.
might have been. I think for me, that might have been the one where he kind of started to balance it a little bit.
Right. Kind of more because Liar Liar's still a comedy, but a lot more kind of drama aspects. Man, I haven't watched Liar Liar in forever.
I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through, which is fine.
Just in case, I don't think I'm going to. I think you guys have definitely. I'm not seeing Earth Girls Are Easy. I'm not going to rewatch anything I think of fondly ever again. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, we recently released our episode on Sin City and 300, and if you have any,
Don't you dare! Nope. No.
Yeah, the Frank Miller episode was an eye opener for Bear and I.
A little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, let's dive a little bit more into why people have the feelings that they do, because it's not just the wackiness. This is horribly misogynistic movie, and in fact, it retroactively goes back and ruins the cartoons that it's based off of.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things in both the graphic novel and the movie, the thing that just like it's a huge disconnect in my mind, where Stanley Ipkiss is supposedly this really good guy, this really sweet guy, and then, everyone is willing to excuse everything he does when he has the mask on, because that's not him.
Right.
And I love that they even throw in the psychiatrist who has written a book about the masks we wear. And, it's just, I think that that's hilarious. But I just, it's like, why does he still get to be the protagonist?
Presented by, wholly unwatchable person, Ben Stein. You get to know anything about Ben Stein. But yeah, there were patches that are rough. But I think the worst is when Stanley doesn't have the mask in his acting.
Yeah.
Like, because these are supposed to be nice guy things, but these are 1994 nice guy things, which, like Jim was saying, before we knew what the word incel meant.
Right.
Because he's like getting tickets for somebody and then just gives them to her, but then like him and his buddy are like, "You're wearing her down." Like,
yeah,
that's not okay.
Yeah, the first line of him interacting with a woman was, "Eventually, I'll wear her down." It's
Yes.
just like it. I will say, seeing Richard Jenny made me sad.
Yeah. R.I.P. One of those actors that popped up in a bunch of things.
He was huge.
Yeah. And then Suicide, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, we are super down.
Yay!
Thanks a lot, Jim Carrey.
You invited me.
So
yeah, but you're not the one bringing us down. We're not blaming you. We're blaming Jim Carrey.
We're blaming the 90s.
Yeah, we're blaming the 90s.
We're blaming the 90s because that was the whole thing. That was huge in the late 90s. Was mid and late 90s was the ultra-violent movies, the explosions, the wanton killing was like pretty much every movie that ever came out. Well, not every movie, but like many of the big name movies that came out.
And the 90s was like, oh yeah, let's do ultra-violence with our beloved cartoons.
Right.
Let's mix it. I mean, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Okay, that one wasn't as that one was so much better because it was violent, but not
Right.
violent.
Well,
I mean, until you
that
start running
felt kind of
people
like
over with
this movie.
seniors.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It felt very Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I agree.
Very Wile E.
Yeah, but
Coyote.
I feel like also after reading I did a refresher on the comic too, and reading the comic, it's like they replaced the Ultraviolence with more misogyny and more odd over sexualization and things like that. The comic didn't really have any. I mean, a little bit of sexualization, but not much. And the movie just went full tilt. But the violence, because I did not realize how violent that comic was.
Right. I mean, in any way, if you were to do this, the movie, like sticking close to the comic, it would have been rated R. There's
easily
a lot of violence and blood, but not. You're right. Not as much sexuality. Not as much. Like, I can't even think of a.
There was like a couple off the wall comments about basically like him just with the mask on, but in disguise, like calling his girlfriend names. And like,
Stanley himself was a dickhead.
Yeah.
In the comic, like he wasn't a good guy before they started.
Yeah.
But basically, once you got it away from Ipkiss, there was almost no sexual. Like there was no
in the comic.
It was weird
Yeah.
the choices.
Comic, yeah.
It was weird the choices they made when they convert, because usually it goes the other way. You take out sex and you take out, cursing and things. And in the movie, it was like they doubled down on things that now would definitely make it more R-rated.
Yeah,
whereas the
totally
comic, I mean,
steered into it.
violence, it's weird, but we kind of accept violence.
Yeah, which is strange. This, I don't know, this comic, and we'll keep the iron curtain over the comic, but
yeah, spoiler free for comics.
For comics, but
unless, like, I was going to say, I did like how in the movie they kind of took the dual mask storylines from the comic and kind of blended that into this one character.
Yeah, it was interesting. This is the first time I'd read the comic, and I don't know. I had to put myself back in a frame of mind for I probably would have the same nostalgia for this that I have for like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar feel to me. Lots of violence for violence's sake, and in both cases, it's kind of a fuckboy fantasy. Like,
right. Well, that's what I was going to say. It's not necessarily. It's not really violence for violence's sake. It's like, I've been like, the world hasn't treated me fair. I'm a man that the world has not treated fair.
It's revenge porn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, in that first storyline, and then the second one, it's like, like I have this very twisted idea of what is right.
What justice
and
is.
what justice is. And therefore, I'm going to make the world a better place, but not really.
It reminded me very much of that era Punisher. It's where it just took me right back to that kind of vigilante, bad guy, good guy thing, but almost as if they did a what if it was a cartoon. It was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
What if we mixed in a little Wile E. Coyote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little Red Riding Hood's Max Fleischer. Is that the name of the cartoon artist that did the Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf?
Oh, with the Augas. Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
yeah.
I was trying to think, what Little Red Riding Hood? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, because in that original Little Red Riding Hood's on the stage
scene. Yeah, that's Fletcher.
Yeah. Which, you want to bring sexualization into cartoons. There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was Bugs Bunny, all of that from, like the 40s, I think.
Yeah.
So, but then, cartoons weren't geared towards kids at that point either. Those were not intended for children.
Right.
Those were intended for adults.
So, doing my research, I found another piece of the 90s that we talked about a little earlier, and that is the swing revival movement that this movie was in the thick of. The band that actually plays at the Coco Bongo Club is the Royal Crown Review, which is like them and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy are credited with, starting in the late 80s to get the whole swing revival movement done. And I thought that was interesting because in a movie like this, like, you've decided that you're going to add the swing element really into so much of this movie, to match the 40s cartoons and the,
Yeah, it really lined up well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is another movie kind of like when we talked about The Spirit, where it's like, this could really be amalgamous until you start seeing things like the cars and but even the cars that show up are older cars.
Some of them.
Yeah. And he mentions, you bring in a Porsche, but it doesn't show any Porsches.
Right.
It's like,
Well, and there's reference to his car, which is an 84 Honda Civic.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Again, doesn't appear on screen.
Right.
But
I think the Porsche did. The Porsche did appear on screen in a flashback scene.
Yeah, in a fantasy. Yeah,
you're right.
Yep.
You're right.
Yeah.
But same thing.
And it struck me how odd that was, that it almost broke especially in a fantasy scene, it broke the theme in a weird way.
Yeah. Well, we had talked about that when we talked about The Spirit, because it's very noir, very, dark and everything. But then there are cell phones. But the cell phone somehow is put into the scene that it doesn't break what you're watching. The Mask definitely had some points where I'm like, is it? Oh yeah, right. This is modern. It's just everything that is done in this is 40s. Like even him living in his apartment, with the landlady down the hall, and that can be any time period. It's not like it's not like what you see for an apartment now, where it's the manager is somebody that just comes in, 8 to 5 and does not live there.
Yeah, and even though it was, it was in Edge City, they made it very New York centric. From the stereotypes of the gangsters to just everything had that very New Yorky vibe.
I'm always amused with that view of New York because I grew up watching the Ninja Turtles cartoon. And it's always like, the punks have mohawks and they carry chains around, and I'm like, what kind of West Side Story bullshit?
Well, I mean, chain's cheap.
Chain is cheap.
Chain is cheap.
True.
But you know exactly what it is, though. It's kind of like this completely misplaced off representation has become the representation. You could show that to someone that's never been here, never been to New York, and they would kind of know. It'd be like it's just synonymous with.
And I wonder where that came from, because I'm not as familiar with all this, but I'm wondering how much the Warriors had to do with that in the late 70s.
Oh, I love
there
that.
you go. Yeah.
And I'm not rewatching that one either.
Can you dig it?
Oh, I love that. They even made a video game of that movie, and I played the crud out of it. I love that movie, and I know I probably should not love that movie.
Well, I mean, there's a certain point where you go back on anything, and there's going to be problematic.
And your brain just goes, wow, this didn't age well.
Yeah.
Much like myself.
We're doing Mystery Men soon, so I just want to point out and get us ready for what this is going to be.
This was the warm-up to Mystery Men? Oh, geez.
Well, yeah. I mean, and, full spoiler there, I didn't like Mystery Men when it came out. So we'll see.
I actually did like Mystery Men when it came out.
So
I wanted to like it, and then I had...
Ben Stiller was another one. Ben Stiller was another one that I put in the category.
Ben Stein's son,
Is it?
Yes.
No, he's not.
Isn't he?
No.
Yeah.
No, he's Jerry Stiller's
Jerry
son.
Stiller, yeah, okay.
Jerry Stiller didn't do nothing like Ben Stein did. So the music, I brought up the music because I want to talk about, I thought it added to the movie, but I like revival swing. So I guess that, that and the theme, despite kind of some of the parts that were problematic, Jen, we got done with it and you were like, that may not be the Jim Carrey movie I hate the most.
Well, that's true, but that's not necessarily a kudos to the movie.
Well, Jim was ruined for this movie. Did your estimation go up at all with this viewing?
No.
Okay. I just remember you saying you didn't hate it as much as you thought you.
No, I didn't hate it as much as I remember hating it. I really don't like it still.
Right.
But, you know.
Didn't they make a sequel? I could have swore they made a sequel.
Well, okay. So, yes, they made... there was originally going to be The Mask 2, because this was super successful. But Jim Carrey said he wouldn't come back and reprise the... So those ideas fell to the side, except they made a Mask Saturday morning cartoon show for 2 years.
That's what it was.
And then...
Didn't they do a movie? Son of Mask or something?
Yes, they did do Son of Mask later, which had Jamie Kennedy in it.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Thank God we didn't have to watch that.
Yeah.
Why didn't they just do one with the dog? That would have been fun.
That would have been hilarious.
I think the dog, or a dog, has like
a
lot of roles in Son of Mask. The dog showed up in the cartoon. I remember that because it follows Stanley further in the cartoon.
I just have visions of like if we take the dog getting the mask in the movie and the cartoon and put it into the same type of writing that happened in the actual comic book, suddenly my brain, like I get an equation in my head and I see dog with mask in movie, dog with mask in comic book format, and with a plus sign, and then there's an equal sign, and I see Ultimate Avengers Hulk.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he's gonna hump some legs, he's gonna pee on some things, it's gonna get real ugly.
I was just thinking like an animated Cujo.
Oof.
Yeah. So
ugly.
Any other things to say about, like, I have been all the way through my notes. People are very very quiet today. So
I mean, I have this weird, I don't know which one I can say is better. You told me right before because I didn't read it until right before we did the episode. And you were like, yeah, arguably, I think the comic was worse than the movie. And I was just like, really? I was not hoping that was what you were going to say. And I sat down and read it, and I honestly don't know which one I could say is better and which one I could say is worse.
They are very, very different from one another.
Sorry, I think the comics fit that genre of because it was Dark Horse comic, it was the indie comics, it was, I mean, kind of dime a dozen, wasn't it? I mean, back then, there were so many things kind of like that, so out in left field, super violent, super just killing characters and leaving things, and just it felt that was kind of in the norm. Whereas the movie, other than Roger Rabbit, I can't think of much that kind of went that, and a lot of the choices they made were so weird to me that, because that was also around the time where there were some hyper-violent movies, and they could have made a animated hyper-violent movie, but they did the weird hyper-sexualized instead.
Yeah.
And that just always struck me as weird.
The only other one other than Who Framed Roger Rabbit and on the other side of the spectrum, and arguably much worse than this movie, would be Cool World.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Which is literally about a cartoon wanting to fuck her way into the real world.
Yeah, that...
Lovely. God, that was the 90s, too.
Oh, God, yes, it was.
I distinctly remember watching that movie several times in the 90s and thinking that was a really great movie, and I don't want to go back and watch that now because just in my head thinking about it going, oh yeah, there was this and then there was that, and I was like, oh, this whole memory is just starting to turn awful.
Yeah, it's not good.
And the more I think of it, I'm not even watching it, and like it's just gonna get worse in my own head.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like you have to. I feel like there's some payback coming, and you ruined some of mine, so I feel like this is a mandatory thing.
All right.
Again, sorry, but I think you got to watch it.
Whose vote was it to put this one on the list?
I think this was one of those we have to do some that none of us are excited about.
Right, yeah. This is one of them. Well, so in my cartoon watching history, the first not intended for children cartoon I saw, and I saw it at a very young age, sorry, Mom, was Fritz the Cat. It's an X-rated cartoon.
Okay.
And
cat.
Yeah, well, he does some really talk about misogyny. But so even that didn't, like, I've rewatched it as an adult. Even that didn't seem as bad as Cool World.
No, because you
especially The Mask, it was not it wasn't even rated R. So
Right.
it didn't
Fritz
go
the
there.
Cat, you knew what it was.
Yes.
No one was surprised. I mean, no one was
Yeah.
surprised. You saw that thing coming.
Yeah.
You
It was
knew
like-
what that
yeah.
was.
Ooh,
It
pardon
was
the
on the
pun.
tin.
But-
It was on the tin. The
Yeah,
contents
but
were on the
Cool
tin.
World
yeah.
or Mask or it just it came out of left field. It was
Yeah.
very it just didn't. They kind of it was like Halloween candy, and it's one of those. It's brightly wrapped and it looks all pretty, and then you open it up and it's one of those weird nougat things.
And you're like, oh no, what have I gotten myself into?
Oh, somebody.
Well, I'm
went for
still
the
going to
cheap
eat the damn
candy
thing because
bins.
it's
Right. Oh my
I mean,
god.
yeah, there is some redeeming value if you want to actually break it down and analyze it, because we can start looking at the whole, what do you do when you are handed pretty much unlimited power? You just can put on this mask and you're a superhero. You're indestructible. You can pull stuff out of thin air. You have cartoon physics. But then you find out that, the mask that you put on has a will of its own and just wants you to kill shit.
But I also noticed that one of the only parts that was ported over from the comic to the movie was when Stanley first realizes what the mask can do and says, "Oh, I have all this power. I could be a superhero." But first,
and
then he goes and
let's get
starts
into my revenge
stuff,
porn.
and he never gets back to the superhero part.
and
Arguably,
the frame by frame balloon animal scene. There was that
Oh, my
little
God.
for one page. They brought that in
right?
perfectly. Same animals, Tommy gun, whole thing. It
Yes.
was like, why?
Well, but I actually liked it better in the movie because the
Yeah,
gang
agreed.
that he's performing for is actually really getting into it, and they're so excited about balloon animals
Yeah.
rather than being like,
Which if I were a street thug, I would be somewhat amused. Like, oh wow, he made me a poodle.
yeah.
If you were a street thug, we have to go back to the Warriors. Jim.
Hang on. I gotta make a stop at the hardware store first.
But yeah, a little of this has diminished for me, just because every time I kind of watch this, I'm like, oh, there are more. That's not okay. It reminds me a lot of Molly Ringwald wrote an editorial piece about watching Candles with her 15-year-old daughter.
Oh,
Oof.
Yeah,
why
you wanna-
would she do that?
Well, because her daughter wanted to watch what she did. She's like, okay, and she hadn't watched it in
Oh.
years, and she basically wrote about how her daughter was like, ooh, hey, Mom.
This is not okay,
And Molly
Mom.
Ringwald's like, yeah.
Yeah, I will say there is some redemption in it. That the quality of it, surprisingly, I mean, just the technical aspect, how they did it, how they merged it, the special effects, they weren't, especially for that time,
Yeah.
they were not that bad. They were given what they were given, but how they produced it, I can understand why it was popular. I can understand why no one had seen anything like that. If you take out the context, which most Americans do, most of us don't. We like the shiny packaging, and we kind of like watching things in snippets. So from a snippet perspective, I get it. I understand how it became this force of nature thing.
Right.
I understand this one a lot more than the third. Okay, so in 1994, Ace Ventura came out, The Mask came out, and so did Dumb and Dumber. And I
still haven't seen Dumb and Dumber.
Neither
watched it when I was in high school, a bunch, because one of my best friends loved Jim Carrey and loved Dumb and Dumber. But that was definitely one of the first. As I got older, I was like, oh no, drop that. And then when they made the new one, less than 10 years ago, I was like, why?
Yeah.
Why? That Jim Carrey is probably why I also can't really do Will Ferrell either in a lot of stuff. It's the intentionally obtuse. Whereas both Ace Ventura and The Mask, I mean, the guys are to a certain extent dumb or gullible or whatever, but they're not placed in a situation where they're intentionally painfully stupid.
Right.
There was also the Tom Arnold movie, The Stupids, which was an entire family of people that
Even
were.
heard of that.
I
It
haven't
just
either.
sounds dumb.
It was bad. But I mean, that's
I still just, I have that nostalgia moment where I'm just like, we're talking about all this stuff, and this is supposed to be comedy and humor, and I'm just like, but what happened to Frasier?
It's coming back.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
It is coming back.
Well, it's funny because in the early 90s, I had a group of friends and we watched a lot of movies, once they were on at the time VHS. And about the same time, Ford Fairlane came out and did not age well.
Started the Dice Man. Okay,
Yeah.
anything with Andrew Dice Clay, was aged out by the time it came out. Like,
right, but we were like, even though that was so terrible, I enjoyed that more than I did Ace Ventura. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, until he got into some serious roles, I was not a fan of Jim.
and I think I'm not going to say every generation, every specific like group now, depending on kind of the time, has that actor because, Will Ferrell's a good example. Steve Carell's a good example. But going even further back, Andrew Dice Clay is a good example. Andrew Dice Clay was not something I should have been listening to when I was listening to Andrew Dice Clay, and I thought it was the most hilarious thing, to the point that my friend Dan and I still have most of the nursery rhymes memorized.
Oh, don't. Please don't. It was running through my head, and then you said it, and I was just like, don't say that out loud.
No,
Don't say that out
no,
loud. Don't say
none
that
of it
out
will
loud.
be said out loud because they're horrible.
Yeah,
But
they're awful.
yeah, it's also, that time period.
Well, and it was that time period. We were all in my friend group, we were all in our early 20s.
Mhm.
And I was like the token woman. Like, I hung out with dudes. I always hung out with dudes.
Gee, I wouldn't expect
You'd
that.
never expect that,
You're
right?
sitting here on this podcast, yeah.
And so, like, when that came up, I thought it was hysterical too, because it's like, oh, this dude is like, yeah, whatever. He's saying all these things, but no, nobody's gonna take him seriously. And so,
And some people did. That's
I
the
know.
thing.
Well, that's
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
They didn't understand that at the time, Andrew Dice Clay walking out on stage was a character, like Larry the Cable Guy is a character.
Right. Absolutely.
Like we were watching was it you? It was, or at least showed me the preview of the roast, and it's like, this is the first time we've ever actually roasted a fictional character.
Oh yeah.
And it's Larry the Cable Guy.
Yeah, and I had to look it up because for some reason I blanked on Lenny Bruce's name, but I mean, even going back, Lenny Bruce.
Yeah.
My dad is of a generation that's like, oh my God, Lenny Bruce. And getting into it, I don't think I ever got that far into Lenny Bruce because of that.
I don't think that you can compare Lenny Bruce to Andrew Dice Clay. Lenny Bruce was saying the things he said to push boundaries. He was not saying
I think he was saying it out of anger.
Yeah.
I remember
agree.
there was something. What was it? There was something that I read that he was a well-regarded
Yes.
comedian within the realms of comedy. He did the structured jokes. I mean, I forget, there was some interview I was listening to, and he was a structured joke teller, really good.
Yes.
But he started he just wasn't having the career he wanted, and his anger had him cursing, and the cursing got him censored and got him shut down, and he did it more and more and more as kind of this, you can't tell me what to say. And then the more he got shut down, the more angry he got and the more popular he got.
Yeah, there's actually a fantastic example weaved into the first couple of the Marvelous.
Maisel.
Yeah, Mrs. Maisel.
I still haven't seen that.
Oh,
It's very good.
Lenny Bruce is a character in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really well done because it talks about a lot of.
Well, it talks about stand up in is it in the early 60s? Yeah, in the early 60s, like late 50s, early 60s, and what it was like, and what was going on in the world at that time. So pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite Lenny Bruce stories is George Carlin. Young George Carlin went to see him in one of his acts. He was getting arrested. George Carlin did everything he could to be arrested and get in the same car as Lenny Bruce. And when he told Lenny that in the back of a police car, Lenny Bruce was like, "What are you, a schmuck?"
I mean, that also goes to George Carlin's comedy style, which was very reminiscent of Lenny Bruce.
Another person that I would put in that same list of Because
Right.
if you are not from that specific generation or exposed to that at a certain age, I don't think it has as much.
Because their whole style was, trying to push boundaries and tell, like spit truth to power, as opposed to Andrew Dice Clay, who's just up there. It's just like, I'm just here for the dirtiest, raunchiest laugh I can get.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but that was his point. He was satirizing toxic masculinity before we had a name for toxic masculinity.
True.
But the problem is that
He
people
became
started
an
to
icon
follow
for it.
Started
Yeah.
to emulate him.
Right.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
There's been a couple of different documentaries on him that I've watched, and that's why he stopped. He was like, "No," he's like, I can't do this anymore."
People think this is what I believe,
right,
not what I'm satirizing.
right,
Yeah.
And it's just super interesting to me that there are these pockets.
Yeah.
I mentioned Adam Sandler as well. And Adam Sandler's comedy at the very beginning was like that type that I normally would hate of I'm the idiot in the room. But like Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, I mean, I still can watch them. If I had watched them 5 years
What was
later,
that last comedy that he did that he got tons of flack for because he was like, it wasn't that long ago. It was within the last.
Could be Halloween.
No, it was within the last like 5 or 10 years. Like he was making fun of Native Americans and
Oh, was it one of the? It was one of the Netflix ones.
Yeah, it was not Once Upon
It
a
was
Time
the
in the
Western.
West, but yeah, like 8 something or
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a Western that he did, and remember he caught tons.
Oh
of
yeah, it
hell
was right
for
around the same time as Tarantino's thing. It was the Hateful Eight, and it was something. Yeah, with a
yes,
number.
it was the
I know what
Hateful
you're
Eight.
talking about.
Hateful Eight. Yes, because they actually had like references to Django and a lot of the same movies in it. And in fact, Jamie Foxx was Django? Yeah, Jamie Foxx was supposed to show up in Hateful Eight as a cameo and then didn't. So yeah. Yeah, just comedy in general is weird.
Yeah, his was Ridiculous Six. Was the Netflix
There you
one.
That's what it
go.
was.
Yeah. And when I talk about my cousin that was 10 years younger, the other thing he loved was Napoleon Dynamite. I just couldn't.
Oh jeez.
Love that movie.
I literally finished that movie. I don't remember who showed it to me. It was
You've erased them from your memory and unfriended them in real
well,
life.
all I remember is that movie. The credits started rolling, and I turned and looked at whoever it was that showed that to me, and I said, "I want that time, that hour and a half of my life, or whatever the hell it was. I
That
want
movie
that,
was not for you guys.
that
It
90
was
minutes
not
of
for
my
you.
life
No.
back."
Yeah.
I was upset.
But I would also place like we're dealing with here, The Mask, a lot of the 90s. The Mask, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, The Water Boy, Ace Ventura, all of those I would kind of put into even going into the Farley movies, so like Black Sheep and Tommy Boy.
Yeah.
A lot of that is a comedy style of a very specific period of time.
Yeah.
Like I don't think any of those would be done today. For better or for worse,
Right.
But if I had seen any of them,
I don't know. Aren't they still making Super Trooper stuff? And they have a lot of those shows from the cast of the Super Trooper, and
That's true.
I think that kind of still falls into it, doesn't it?
I don't know. I almost think stoner movies are a different genre.
Stoner movies are kind of ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Well, but thinking about that type of humor, National Lampoon's Vacation movies are similar. They're not quite as cartoony or larger than
Right.
life,
Yeah.
but it's the same kind of this dude is an idiot and bad things happen.
Those are generally now more direct to video, though, instead of these were summer blockbusters, But yeah, I think that the time period of that, I mean, you may still get those movies made or streamed or those kind of things because it's just there's so many other places to distribute and go to that. But I don't think we're going to see anything huge.
Yeah.
Like these were in the same style. I think the last even close to this type was all of the Will Ferrell stuff, so like all the Talladega Nights and New Anchorman and all of that
Old
stuff.
Stepbrother and
Right. And I may be wrong. We may see a whole new something that I'm going to grumble like an old man about because I just don't get it. But, this is the stuff that I got when I was younger. It's fading as I'm getting older,
Yeah.
but My nostalgia's keeping it pretty close.
Yeah, we get it. It's your dog.
Oh my god. Did you skin a cheetah?
Did you kill a cheetah?
Okay. Well, anything
I
else?
said that to my mom once.
Did you kill a cheetah?
We were going to a wedding. She came walking out in this matching, like, the blue and white and black, like, urban camo color. Came out in a matching, like button-down shirt and pants, but it was that color, but it was in, like, tiger stripe all the way up and down. And she literally, I was standing right beside my little brother, and she comes walking out of the house, and I hadn't seen what she was wearing yet, and I was like, what the fuck is that? Did you kill a cheetah? She was mad at me the rest of the day, and my little brother could not keep a straight face anytime he was within eyesight of my mom.
Did you just airlift in from Jersey? I mean, come on, that's South Dakota. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it was.
That's
it was
a pretty wild
ridiculous.
print for South
Were
Dakota.
you going to the funeral?
No, it was a wedding.
He said a wedding. Was this in the 90s?
It was my cousin Robbie's wedding. Would have been. I was still in high school, so yeah, probably the 90s.
So as we go down memory lane,
Oh.
Jim, is there anything else you wanted to say about The Mask?
Oh, no.
Fair. Very fair.
So we read one of, several volumes. The omnibus that we have has 2 more volumes. Jim, will you continue to read this comic?
No.
I'm sorry what we did to you.
Yeah, sorry, Jim.
No, it's perfectly fine. No, it's just, no, probably not.
Okay. Jen, will you continue to read this comic?
No. Nope.
Fair?
Listen, I read half of the 700 megabytes of this comic before and I fell asleep at around page 100. And I was just like, okay, gotta wake up, stand up, walk around, eat a slice of pizza. Okay, time to just skim. Yep, they're talking. Yep, okay, and now we got the mask on. Anything pertinent? Nope, more ultraviolence. Okay, and
Done.
mask is off. Okay, done. 50 pages later, in like 20 minutes, I'm just like, okay, I didn't miss anything. Like, first 150 pages, I was like, no, I'm good. I know everything I need to know about this.
Yeah. I do have something to say that I forgot to say, is that unlike the movie, there is a strong female character in the
It's
comics
true.
that is consistent. And actually,
Who shows up about every 40 pages.
she is one of the only women in this comic.
It's true.
They don't even portray women.
Oh, yeah, they don't
At
really
all.
think about it.
In
It's a little
any
bit-
other-
It was a little bit like Two Guns, where like there were like 2 women and one was a waitress.
Yeah.
The other one was the one woman pulling absolutely everything together.
Yes. So sorry, I just
No,
wanted to throw
that's
that in.
that's interesting. You know, it's although thinking about it, there's only 2 in the movie. There's the reporter and there's Cameron Diaz.
And the co-worker that takes the tickets from
The
him.
very,
Shows
very
up-
first one.
Shows
yeah.
up at the very beginning.
The
and never
landlady.
Again. Okay, yeah.
There are a lot
I
more
don't count her
women.
as a woman.
Yeah, I mean, okay, there was
I don't count her as a woman.
in
Yeah, that's
the
great.
in the comic there was the teacher, but other than that,
Right. No, you're
Oh,
right.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, I am also not going to keep reading this comic. I did not get the omnibus because the only version that I could find physically was like pretty expensive, and I was like, yeah, well, I found the file on Comixology. Check that out.
It
And
was like 377 pages. It was no more than like 6 frames per page. It was a really fast read, but it was
yeah.
also super repetitive.
yes, it's super repetitive, super
Yeah.
violent. But if you are a fan of comics like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, or other like super violent comics, this would have to be in your collection, I guess.
The version of
I don't
Winona
think
Earp
this
that we
like Johnny. Johnny reminds me more of the more oddball, goofball. This didn't.
Yeah.
It
I
tried
agree.
to have oddball, but there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of oddball. Even you talked about the teacher. Even the teacher, the character had regrets about doing what he did to the teacher. Like he
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
should I maybe I shouldn't have offed her.
Yeah.
There was this
Yeah.
weird kind of like a dark edge where Johnny, I don't know. I'm not going to read it again because I don't want you ruining that too.
Graphically novel where we ruin your life one story at a time.
Yeah.
One memory at a time.
Which
At
is
least
weird.
a generation of it. Just leave the 90s alone. I can deal with ruining the aughts, but just leave my formative years alone.
You would think ruining things one story at a time would be more of a theme for rec conversations, and not so much for graphically novel. But I mean, I'm going to give us bonus points. Negative or positive, who knows? But bonus points.
Negative 30 from House Graphically Novel.
That's right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic. Even though you get a little bit into the mask and then you find there's not that much to talk about. But hopefully we have you back at some point. We'll find something else that hopefully will not ruin for you. Maybe something that you haven't seen or read, and have you back on.
Oh, it wasn't that ruined. Yeah, absolutely. Bring me back whenever you guys want.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
But until then, take it away, Vandello.
Come with me, I'll tell a story that you might have heard before. Graphically novel, but the same old trouble. Villains always knocking at the door. Pretty pictures on the page, but nothing ever stays the same. Do 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 do. Come at me, and I'll show you something you ain't never seen before. Right or wrong, oh can't we all just get along? My mask is no different than yours. Pretty pictures on the screen, but nothing's ever as it seems. Do 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 do. You don't want to see my back.